that they bought into so much false belief, and now they've got like this new set of concepts or a new framework that changes the definitions of words that they had previously taken for granted. Now they've got the correct definitions. Now they've got the correct worldview, and they're really, all they need to do is refine it. Is you're saying at this point, ŽIŽEK says, no, it doesn't matter if you think you're red-pilled or woke. The more you think that you are waking up, the more in the dream you actually are. No?
No.
Okay,
the point is, the they live glasses, when you put them on, you're seeing the real of ideology. You're actually getting tapped in to all the unconscious dynamics that are going on that are organizing your conscious socio-symbolic reality. And so for him, like, he does think we can wake up, so to speak, whether you want to call it woke or red pill, that doesn't really matter. I mean, okay, it's funny we use that because when he talks about the Matrix, his famous line is that I want a third pill, right? And so the third pill, as far as the Matrix examples go, okay, so we all know red pill is you just wake up into the real reality, opposed to living your life with the blue pill in the illusion, right? ŽIŽEK wants a third pill, let's call it a green pill, because what he wants is to be able to see the reality of the illusion. And what he means is, like, that's ideology. Like, ideology is illusory, but it also is reality. Like, it configures our whole world. And so what he wants to be able to perceive is the illusionary dimension that makes our reality reality.
So you're not just seeing the illusion, you're actually realizing the illusion structures our reality, but you're trying to see how so the question is how does it structure our reality? That's what he says? That's why he wants to know?
Here's the point, right? Like, so fantasy, right? Like, if we have certain fantasies that tell us, like, this is how you satisfy the other, or this is how you satisfy your society, or right? Like, this is what you got to be. The whole point is, that's an illusion. It's not guaranteed to satisfy anything. And yet it completely structures our world, like those ideological fantasies. And so the point is, just like the generation of sublime objects, right? Like, Jewish people don't have any special relationship to jouissance. That's an illusion. But look how much reality that illusion had, which is to say, look how much causal impact that illusion had on it during World War II because of that illusion.
Or for instance, let's just go with something a little more modern. There's an entire, a very, 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 very small percentage of this country is really radically to the point of wanting civil war, like attached to the Democratic Party. And it hated Bernie. And it did everything it could to undermine him. And that was so obvious that a lot of people dropped out of politics right then in 2016. Like, I saw it happen. I saw a lot of people also just be like, oh, we can't even forgive Bernie for getting behind Hillary, right? There's a lot of people who are like, well, he's just he's just actually bringing people into the thing. Okay. The party, how does it handle the fact that Hillary loses to Trump? Well, you blame... surprise, surprise, we weren't aware. America's just that racist. And also, Putin wants to ruin our enjoyment. And so, or maybe I shouldn't even say that, but because that's technical jargon. But I'll just say, yeah, Putin wants to destroy us. And I mean, I was saying in 2016, they would rather go to war with someone who has nukes than accept responsibility for choosing one of the most corrupt and unlovable candidates in human history. They were that cocksure of themselves. They really didn't care about losing, that they would rather blame Putin. And then, the red, like, Hillary said that, like, he's like a vile piece of, like, she said something really crazy. Like, the adjectives she used, I can't even recall exactly what they are. And I don't want to get it wrong, but this was, she said crazy stuff in the past about him, and as have a lot of Democrats recently because of Russiagate. And so it's like okay, so even if everything they believed about Russiagate is true, and a lot of it's not, it's still one of those things where it's like, yeah, but there were other factors. How has this one been turned into such a scapegoat?
No, I mean, I think it's abundantly clear that the Democratic Party is pathologically incapable of facing up to its own intrinsic problems.
Yeah. And so,
I mean, that is the ideological distortion.
And the reason, so the only reason I brought in Putin was because every time we talk about Jews, to me, it's so fucking remote, because I don't know anybody who has ever espoused actual anti-Semitism. I don't even see it online because I just avoid wherever you go to see it. And so it's like, it's actually very remote for me. But what, so I just went
also maybe the purest form of ideological scapegoating that ever occurred.
Well, because it seems so crazy to us because it's so remote. But it's like, yeah, to think, because you kind of did elaborate. You said, just imagine, it clearly mobilized a lot of people.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, though, fascists will always just take whatever's popular in the moment. And these are popular currents. The fact is the overwhelming majority of Germans probably didn't think the Jews are actually all these things, but they're also like, well, as long as they're not taking me off, I'm okay with it. The camps were mysterious. A lot of people didn't know about they're just being relocated. This is why, the language of relocating people is so scary, is because at the point that the state starts relocating people, like taking them out of their homes, and they're carting them off, like the state's usually going to say and even show pictures of like, look, no, this is where they're going. They're okay. We'll hear testimonies about how wherever they went is all right. No, the state will do whatever it can to fucking get rid of anything that's really like a burden or expensive or in the way, and so you had like actual ideologues who just hated Jews, who really wanted to, but what I'm saying is that you had a lot of people who were like, oh, Jews, bad.
But here's the thing.
They're being taken away. I guess I don't really care that much because I'd rather just look out for me and my own. But what I'm saying is a lot of people didn't believe it. Right.
But two things. One,
because let me finish that with the Trotskyist thing. So what a Marxist will say, or at least Trotskyists in my life would say about this, is just that the bourgeoisie will always work with the fascists at the point that they've lost control and they're not able to do things in a liberal order. So they'll always work with the fascists rather than the communists, right? And so what ends up happening is you have a professional managerial class who opportunistically takes the side of the despot, who's willing to use this scapegoat that's so horrendous. It's a lesser evil for them in order to maintain their status quo or get it back at that point. And so they go, okay, I'm going to go along with it. But, and what that means is you have an intelligentsia who is opportunistic and in bad faith about the whole thing. They'll keep talking it. They'll say the things that one is supposed to say. And we see that today with today's professional managerial class. There's a whole discourse that it is supposed to espouse. Point being, the lower class people, the uneducated people, the easily manipulated people, the people who are going along with it, the people who have been being radicalized and turned reactionary, they believe it. They absolutely believe it. And at that point, it is powerful and it is motivating them. So I just had to clarify because I didn't want to leave that hanging where it was at.
All right. Well, two clarifications on my end too. So one, Zizek's whole theory of belief or ideological belief is that no one actually has to have a first person belief for the belief and the ideology to function.
Right.
We go along with things not because we feel like we have a first person belief in it, but because we think everybody else around us has a first person belief in it. So you can have a belief that functions even if nobody actually has a first person belief in it, simply because they believe others believe.
Exactly.
So, we talk about transference is the subject's supposed to know. We can easily talk about belief as the subject's supposed to believe. But there is, it's almost irrelevant whether or not there is a first person belief in somebody. The point is there a belief that there's a first person belief in the other? And that certainly was the case in Nazi Germany. Second, Zizek says, look, like when it comes to ideological fantasy, like the frame of fantasy where you're looking at people through this phantasmatic lens, it's not that you have to view them as like actual monsters. All the fantasy has to do is raise your suspicion about them. And he goes out of his way to talk about it like that, where that's why, like, when I heard Trump start doing these like suggestions or whatever he was doing, like, it always raises an alarm in me, because whenever some political figure is trying to raise your suspicion about a certain group, like, that's all it takes is for you to suspect there might be something with them going on that's wrong or whatever. And that lens of suspicion, it's not the lens of, oh, they're a monster or they're inhuman or whatever. It can go there through suspicion, but all it takes for somebody to go along with it is suspicion.
So in a sense, the most powerful factor is not the person who is just like, Jews have literally ruined the world, I fucking hate them. It's the person who's like, I mean, maybe.
Honestly, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's fair.
And okay, yeah. Zizek talks about these two procedures of ideology. So this is a great quote. I was going to read it earlier and then whatever, sidetrack. But this is from Conversations with Zizek. And so in Sublime, this book of interviews, it came, I want to say, anywhere like 10 years after Sublime Object. And so throughout that period, he had been refining what he thinks, how, like, the structure of ideology, what ideology does. So he's going to say, like, oh, I have an issue with my old definition of ideology. So I'm going to read that. But then in the next paragraph, he basically goes, yes, of course, what I just said works, but there's another side to it. So the point is, he maintains what he thinks ideology is as presented in the Sublime Object of Ideology, but he has a kind of like amendment or a second aspect that he adds onto it. So he says, I am no longer satisfied with my old definition of ideology, where the point was that ideology is the illusion which fills in the gap of impossibility, and inherent impossibility is transposed into an external obstacle. Now, okay.
Yeah, please.
So that's really important. So what he's saying he's doing in Sublime Object is he's saying, look, there is like this point of antagonism, inconsistency, traumatic gap in a social order. Now, in capitalism, we can say it's the class struggle between proletariat and capitalist, right?
Yeah.
So that's the gap of impossibility he's talking about, right? So what the point is, there are structural deadlocks, structural conflicts, structural problems baked in to every society, especially capitalism, okay? So the point is, though, all right, these are intrinsic impossibilities, intrinsic contradictions, intrinsic antagonisms. We do not want people to focus on those, because if we focus on those, solving them means drastically changing society itself.
I wouldn't.
A capitalist society.
Right. I wouldn't have a job anymore. Right. Like it, or
I'm like that.
Like, I'm not going to be, any existing senator is not going to be a senator in that world. They're not going to be able, so it's the bipartisan agreement between the two parties, which is the unspoken things that they share, that if anybody starts shining any light on what they all share, they're going to freak out and do everything they can to stop that person, even if it requires killing them.
Exactly. Yeah. And so what he's saying is that what ideology primarily does is it takes one of its structural contradictions baked into the society itself, and it transposes it onto an external obstacle. So the issues leading up to Nazi Germany, in Germany, were all these structural issues, economic, political, etc. But That's a huge complicated web of structural dynamics. Things get much clearer if you exchange these intrinsic structural conflicts for an external object that you can go, oh, it's just this thing over here that came along and fucked things up. If we get rid of this, things go back to smooth functionality. That's the ideology, is that, oh, the problem is some foreign intruder, foreign invader, when in fact there's structural dynamics that have caused the problems to emerge. And so hopefully that clarifies that. So let me reread it. I am no longer satisfied, even though he sticks to it. He's just saying he's not satisfied with this being all ideology is. I am no longer satisfied with my old definition of ideology, where the point was that ideology is the illusion which fills in the gap of impossibility, and inherent possibility is transposed into an external obstacle, and that therefore what needs to be done is to reassert the original impossibility. This is the ultimate result of a certain transcendentalist logic. You have an a priori void, an original impossibility, and the cheating of ideology is to translate this inherent impossibility into an external obstacle. The illusion is that by overcoming this obstacle, you get the real thing, all the real sublime enjoyment. I am also tempted to say that the ultimate ideological operation is the opposite one. That is the very elevation of something into impossibility as a means of postponing or avoiding encountering it. Now, so here's what he's saying. On the one hand, ideology takes some built-in impossibility, something the society just cannot do, cannot resolve, and then it displaces that onto some external thing, the Jews, the Muslims, the whoever you want to blame, a scapegoat, and say, okay, if we get rid of that, then this problem we're facing, this impossibility gets resolved. Okay. But then he comes along and sees also this other operation, which is I'm going to elevate something into impossibility as a means of postponing or avoiding encountering it. This is another thing ideology does, which is to say it's kind of the promise of a better tomorrow. It's saying like, okay, there's something impossible in our society. Here's why we can't achieve it right now, but and it continues to be postponed and avoided, but we still seek to reach that thing eventually. And so then he goes on to clarify this a bit. Again, I am almost tempted to turn the standard formula around. Yes, on the one hand, ideology involves translating impossibility into a particular historical blockage, thereby sustaining the dream of ultimate fulfillment, a consummate encounter with the thing, jouissance. On the other hand, ideology also functions as a way of regulating a certain distance with such an encounter. That's what he's saying. Ideology tells you why you don't have the enjoyment you fantasize about. Like it justifies to you why you lack. And so in capitalist society, there's all kinds of ways, people are struggling right now. People can't live the old standard of life that consumerism was based around, right? There's all this stuff going on. And so ideology will tell you why you're not getting the thing. And when it tells you why you're not getting the thing, it avoids, again, well, you're not getting the thing because of structural reasons. There's some sort of thing that's elevated to this position of impossibility. And so the point is, it keeps you desiring, it keeps you invested in the ideological system, because if we just push forward, if we just get through whatever obstacle we have, this system is going to give me the enjoyment that I believe it promises me. So he ends it by saying, ideology sustains at the level of fantasy precisely what it seeks to avoid at the level of actuality. It keeps us desiring. There's some lure out there that keeps us invested in the system that we don't actually have at the moment. It endeavors to convince us that the thing, jouissance, cannot ever be encountered, that the real forever eludes our grasp. So ideology appears to involve both sustenance and avoidance in regard to encountering the thing, enjoyment.
Sustenance
Yeah, sustenance. So
and enjoyment.